by the Titanic. But when I found the Titanic, the ground spoke. It was like going to a museum, but there's no guard on duty. And the question is, do we go through the doors of that deep sea museum to appreciate or to plunder? So I arrived at Woods Hole March 10, 1967, as a naval intelligence officer and assigned to this deep diving submarine Alvin. And Alvin was my home for over 25 years. I spent many years of my life inside this little cocoon, diving to the ocean floor. Amazing series of discoveries that we did. Chronicled, my first article in National Geographic was Dive into the Great Rift, was our dive in Project Famous, the first manned exploration to the mid-ocean ridge. I was walking the halls of National Geographic, and Sam Matthews back then was the word guy. He was the word guy of the magazine. And he called me into his office. He says, "Bob, we're going to do a big article in the December 1981 issue of the magazine. And we've written the article. We don't need any help on that. But we want you to sit down with the art department and craft a piece of artwork of a way, your vision of the future. How do you really see us moving into the future?" And I had actually became convinced that it wasn't through a physical presence, wasn't through actually diving. I was spending all my time going up and down in a freezing elevator, just as Jim just did in Challenger Deep. I think it was 6 hours, whatever. He spent most of his time in an elevator. And I had spent most of my time in an elevator, and I became convinced that there was a new way of doing things. And this was the piece of artwork that I published in 1981. In the December issue. And the whole idea was to move away from using physical presence to a term I coined called telepresence. And the idea was that if I could replace my physical presence with my spirit and literally have an out-of-body experience and beam myself down, I could then beam myself into my vehicle systems, and then my vehicle systems didn't have to come up. And I would be able to work 24/7. So instead of a few hours on the bottom, I could spend 24 hours a day on the bottom. That cartoon became a real design system at Woods Hole called the Argo-Jason system. And we began developing this system during the Cold War because the Navy had interest not only in exploration and discovery, but in other kinds of programs. And I'll lift the blanket a little on that one, but I can't lift it fully. But anyway, what was interesting was the first vehicle system I developed was on the Nor and was the Argo vehicle system. The idea was that Argo was my search system, that it would go down and find things, and then once I found things, I would deploy my remotely operated vehicle, Jason. And my passion back then, early on, was to find the Titanic. The Titanic was a race was going on, our own Cold War race, in the three blue water oceanographic institutions at the time, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, Scripps, and the Columbia University's Lamont Doherty. They were the three, what we call blue water oceanographic institutions that actually could go into the great deep ocean. I wanted to find the Titanic, but I didn't have any funding to find the Titanic, because the Navy was not interested in finding the Titanic. They wanted to deal with two submarines we lost during the Cold War, the Thresher and the Scorpion. In the case of the Scorpion, it went down with nuclear weapons. And they wanted me to map those two sites and to find out what was going on down there, because they had two nuclear reactors. They wanted to know what they were doing to the environment. And they also wanted to know where those nuclear weapons were, and they wanted to know if the Russians had been down there. So we needed a cover for those operations. So I said, well, what about the Titanic as a cover? And we decided that we would use the Titanic